Okay, everyone, welcome to day 3. Today is involving more complicated proofs. I'm going to do the first one with you, and then I'm going to ask you to pause and try to do the second one, and then come back. So we always start out our proofs by doing statements and reasons, and we always start by writing our givens. So here we know angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So that's this little blue one, this little blue one. And we also know angle 4 is congruent to angle 2. So those don't have any overlap. So I can't do any substitutions because they don't equal each other. But if I look, those angles put together form my larger angles here, which share a side, BG. So what I want to do is I want to add those together. So I'm going to say angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to angle 3 plus angle 4. And that's addition. And then next I can say that 1 plus 2 is equal to ABG, because that's the bigger angle on the outside here. And that's equal to DEG, which is this bigger angle on the outside. And that's by substitution. So now I'm focusing on that I know these big angles, which I'm going to indicate in red, are congruent. So knowing these big angles that I'm indicating in red are congruent, that helps me see that I have a transversal of BG. So therefore, ED must be parallel to AB. So that's my last step, which is ED is parallel to BEA. And the reason for that is, I want you to pause and think about it and come back. That's because those angles are corresponding. Angles congruent means the lines have to be parallel. Okay, so let's try number 2. So I'm going to start it with you. So we have statements and reasons. And this time we know angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2. And that's given. So that means 1 plus 2 equals 180. And that's definition of supplementary. And that's what supplementary means. So now if we look at that diagram, they didn't tell me much else. But if I look up here, this is a line. That being a line means what? So pause and think about that. Okay, so hopefully you paused and thought about that. And what that means is that the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3 equals 180. And the reason why that is linear pairs are supplementary. Those are a linear pair, that's what we learned, because they make a straight line. They're adjacent to each other and they make a straight line. So now if we look, we know that these two both equal 180. And they both have angle 2 in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do substitution, where I say measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 equals the measure of angle 2 plus the measure of angle 3, because they both equaled 180. And then I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, which gives me 1 equals 2. And that's subtraction. What I did is I subtracted 2 from each side. And now that I know 1 is congruent, not to 2, sorry, to 3, what is the relationship there? Pause and think about it and come back. So hopefully you paused and thought about it and got that 1 and 3 are corresponding. So it's the same thing again. Corresponding angles means that the lines congruent means the lines are parallel. All right, so this proof, everyone, we are going to do step by step because I want you trying to do it on your own. So we're going to start with statements and reasons. And my first statement is JEB is congruent to EGD. And I just want to focus on that one given right now. We'll come back and do our other givens in a minute. So if I know JEB is congruent to EGD, what does that tell you that could possibly help me with this proof? So I want you to pause and think about that for a second. Okay, so the one thing that does tell me is that AB is parallel to CD. And that's because corresponding angles congruent implies parallel. And I'm not sure if I'm going to need to use that, but it helps me, possibly. It's true. And if you include true things that you don't use, it's no big deal. All right, my next given, which I'm going to write down now, is that EF bisects JEB. So if EF bisects JEB, what does that mean? And notice I'm separating my givens. You don't have to, but I am in this case. So pause and think about that. All right, so the fact that EF bisects JEB, that means that angle JEF is equal to angle FEB. And that also means that it's equal to half of JEB. And all of that is due to the definition of bisect. So that means these two are equal. And then the fact that I know, and I'm going to put this back in my other given, that GH bisects EGD, pause and add that to number 4. So that means that EGH is equal to HGD is equal to half of EGD. So that means this purple one equals this purple one. Now what I'm really looking for is that EF is parallel to GH. So if I look at that, I can use a couple of different angles. I could use that EGH is equal to JEF. How do I know? What's the reason for why angle JEF is equal to angle EGH? And that's halves of equal quantities are equal. And now why does knowing those blue angles are congruent tell me those lines are parallel? Because I know those lines are parallel now. And that's because corresponding angles congruent implies alternate interior, or implies parallel. Don't know what I was thinking. Okay, and there's that proof. So last one, number 4 here. So number 4, again, we have our statements and our reasons. And notice back here, I never actually used what I said in step 2, but that's okay. So we know that AC is parallel to DG. And we know that 1 is congruent to 3. And that's given. So I know that 1 is congruent to 3. And I know that AC is congruent to DG. What does AC being parallel, not congruent, parallel to DG tell me? Well, that tells me that 1 is congruent to 4. Why? Think about that. And that's because parallel lines implies alternate interior angles congruent. So now that I know 1 is congruent to 4 and 1 is congruent to 3, pause and tell me the next step. And our next step is angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And that's substitution. And now if I know 3 is congruent to 4, I can say that BE is parallel to GH because alternate interior angles congruent implies parallel lines. So that's the end of today's video. Please note down any questions. Tomorrow in class, we'll work on the classwork. Have a good day.